Now that Lady of the Scales Mercedes has been out for a while, we've had the chance to see how she performs across different types of content. As one of the premier light units in epicseven, she brings a pretty versatile kit packed with buffs and debuffs. With this, she has shown herself to be pretty incredible in immortality or tank focused team lineups, or even as an all-around good buffer slash debuffer usable in pretty much anywhere. With that in mind, in today's video, we'll be breaking down her kit, how to build her, and exploring where she shines best. But as always, if you found today's video to be helpful, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. But with that said, let's break down now everything that you need to know about Lady of the Scales Mercedes. Let's start by breaking down her skills. Skill 2, Scales of Equity. At the start of battle, the foremost ally is automatically granted Offering, and this is a buff that targets the foremost ally and buffs them with a special effect. If said Offering slash Sacrifice ally dies, the entire squad recovers 50% of their max health. On top of this, whenever an enemy gains combat readiness during battle, Mercedes herself will also steal half of the combat readiness effects increases that are given across all enemies. Now, this basically means that she naturally punishes enemies that give turn boosts or turn altering or turn increasing effects, and this also means that she is able to keep up with a lot of characters, especially if you end up doing this in an AoE fashion. As a teaser, this kind of means that she does pretty well into characters like Peyra, or even against characters like a mid, depending on what your goal is. Now for her skill 3, when her skill 3 is activated, it starts by cleansing every debuff from all allies, and of course this is pretty interesting, obviously, because it is a full dispel as opposed to a 2-turn or 1-turn dispel, or 2 or 1 buff or debuff dispel. Now, next, the entire team gains a 25% increase to their combat readiness, which is honestly part of the reason why she can be so flexible. Now, the other half of the skill is actually in relation to the chosen ally, and this refers to, obviously, the character that is known as the Offering. Now, activating the skill will require sacrificing 20% of the Offering's allies' health in order to trigger the effect, but this will then grant all allies the Abundance effect, enabling the 70% damage sharing across the team, and also offering this Abundance effect, which gives you the fixed damage or additional damage on the target. Now, this is obviously pretty insane. However, in addition to this, when you actually take a look at the effects of the Offering character, if said Offering character dies, obviously you not only share, or I guess give the healing to the entire team, you'll also already probably have mitigated a decent amount of damage because of the effect that you gain from applying Offering. Now, that said, we do have to talk about her skill 1, because her skill 1 is arguably one of the best parts of her kit as well. And now, although she does present herself initially as a Soul Weaver type character and is mostly focused on effect resistance or health, this is pretty impactful, as this allows her to apply a fear with a 75% chance. Now, although this initially is just a single target ability, you are able to soul burn this to increase the chance to 100% and also make this AoE. Now, obviously, if you've played characters like Mort, you understand just how annoying Fear can be, and although this is a 40% chance debuff that can be dispelled, if it happens to land in your favor across the board, not only is this pretty crazy, this is, again, also on top of being given things like an additional damage dealt, also in addition to dealing with a character that has insane mitigation and a lethal, or rather an immortality, alongside a healing to all allies on the team. Now, of course, in addition to just the value of being able to soul burn this, it is also pretty interesting to consider that she can be built on counter, and if you do end up using her on counter set, you probably will start pissing people off. And I myself already have experienced the pretty annoying gameplay cycle of fighting against a Lady of the Scales Mercedes, her countering me or countering my my Fire Litica, and then me being feared and not being able to use my skill 3 after a skill 2. Now, in terms of her build, though, we can now talk about the various different builds that you have access to, as there are plenty of ways that people are choosing to gear her. This includes a build with the split of effect resistance and effectiveness, as some people will probably show, and there are also builds or emphasis builds with bulk, or builds that honestly just focus on one stat or another. Now, from here, you obviously can also choose to not just run her as this 270 speed build, but also the slower 180 to 200 range, depending depending on whether you use something like counter, speed set, protection set, anything in between. Now for two-piece effects, or two-piece sets rather, you do obviously have access to basically any two-piece set effect depending on what your build is, and especially if you're running her on this multi-stat focus build where you have effectiveness, effect resistance, speed, health, and defense, it'll probably feel pretty decent to use anything in between, or barring, or anything between things like health, defense set, immunity, you name it, it's probably going to be fine. Now, as for her main stats, what I've been running currently are HP percent, defense percent, effect resistance, and some sort of variation of this, including speed on boot, especially if you're trying to make her fast. But effectively, what I found is that the better your stats are, or the more substat rolls, or any, again, the higher equipment score that you have in general, probably the better. Though I do feel that depending on what you're looking for, you will likely end up needing to use something like a speed boot or something like an HP or effectiveness ring, depending on, again, whether or not you're trying to reach something like 100 effectiveness, or if you're trying to reach 200 effect resistance, of course, in which case you'll need an effect resistance ring. But let's now move to her artifacts, as there are equally as many choices for Mercedes. Now, the first one that we should talk about is actually not even the one that I have on currently, but rather Soul Constellation, as this is definitely one of the best artifacts that honestly you can have, especially if you're trying to be more versatile. Now, even at plus 15, this artifact grants you 30 effect resistance and increases your combat readiness push by 12% whenever an opponent uses a non-attack skill. Now, fortunately, most of the characters, or I guess openers in the game, do end up using this, but the caveat to this is that she can only do this once per turn, which again, if you're cutting or stealing the turn from someone, that's basically all you need anyways. Now, additionally, though this sneaky combat readiness push might seem minor in terms of how much combat readiness push you actually steal, this, alongside the natural benefits that she gets from combat readiness stealing, honestly kind of makes her super insane, especially if you're using something like the Soul Constellation artifact alongside her skill 2 against characters like Amid or even Emalpera. Now, if Soul Constellation isn't available, you do also obviously have access to other artifacts, and that includes artifacts like Eternus, which is also pretty decent if you are allowing yourself to get debuffed. But in addition to this, things like Wondrous Potion Vial can also be fine, especially if you're trying to prevent yourself from getting one turn stunned, or one debuff stunned, or getting slept, or anything of this nature. Now, if you are running her on something slower, or running her on counter, obviously Celestine would also be fine, as this gives you a bit of sustain. But overall, though, you basically have access to, I guess, any artifact that you choose depending on what build you, I guess, end up deciding on. There is always the tried and true and more trusty Bastion of Hope, which just gives you a decent amount of effect resistance. Now, in terms of PvP, we should also talk about this, as there are tons of different ways to play Lady of the Scales. Now, you're already seeing her quite a bit, or I've personally already seen her quite a bit in Arena, and although you are definitely able to obviously use her in RTA, let's start by, I guess, talking about her in Arena. Now, in Arena, her impact is slightly different, but still strong as opposed to her RTA performances, and she can still, I guess, in most cases, control slower setups and cleanse debuffs, but in general, the defenses used by enemies can often revolve around cheesing or trapping you into bad spots with weird builds or psychopathic lineups if you aren't careful. Now, of course, though RTA builds need to be more versatile or flexible, since, well, in most cases you need to draft different characters in different setups, you're also, or rather I should say, in Arena, you're more often than not able to just force the exact same team, or force whatever team composition that you like, without necessarily, or not even necessarily, without being able to ban out a singular character whatsoever. Now, in terms of RTA specifically, though, it's on maintenance, apologies, but in most cases what you can expect from Arena is that you do need to consider that, as she is, again, I guess, pretty versatile or flexible character overall, this does make her a character that you may be able to pick in the earlier 1, 2, or even on the ban pick slot, though of course, at the very minimum, she does appear to be a character that will be able to be used in the 4-5 slot as somewhat of a 4-span, as again, she does offer a lot of counterplay, or she does present herself as a good counter pick, I should say, against a lot of characters that either may, I guess, apply too many debuffs, or against characters that offer too much combat readiness to their team. Now, when it comes to PvE content, which isn't closed, by the way, Lady of the Scales kind of finds herself in a weird spot. And even though we have lots of different activities, in this case, one of the things that you need to know about her is that although she does offer a decent value from her S3 cleanse and skill 2 passive heal and mitigation, a lot of the effect, or a lot of the value that you may find or want from someone like Lady of the Scales is actually from her skill 1 and how impactful a debuff like Fear is. However, unfortunately, Fear isn't a debuff that you can actually use against most of the bosses in the game. And although this does kind of diminish her effectiveness in something like any of the PvE content, there is always the potential for future content like the Trial of Constellations or even upcoming PvE activities that may allow Mercedes to shine. It's just that for this period currently, especially, there really aren't too many PvE encounters where Lady of the Scales finds herself as a must-have. With this, let's kind of go over the pros and cons for Lady Mercedes as of now. First and foremost, she is a strong PvP utility character, and her kit is clearly designed for control and support, excelling in both RTA and Arena. She can apply Fear, cleanse debuffs, and manipulate combat readiness, and this makes her pretty strong, especially if you need a versatile support. Now, as always, I should say, her soul burn is pretty insane, and a lot of these openers soul burn are honestly pretty crazy, but hers, especially being an AoE enhancement of her otherwise single target S1 that then allows her to apply an AoE Fear, does make her pretty insane. But beyond this, or even just this, her ability to steal combat readiness from the enemy team, while also having access to artifacts like Sacred Tree Branch, Guardian Ice Crystal, Celestine, or Soul Constellation, means that she can offer surprise factors, but also pretty insane value from the different artifacts that she has access to. Now, in terms of the cons, there really aren't too many, honestly. You could argue that she doesn't have too much PvE value, and I guess you could also argue that because of her constellations and how her build works, she doesn't have an insane amount of free stat, and otherwise having a 14 to maybe 15,000 HP character doesn't quite feel as insane as, I guess, someone like a New Moon Luna, who can have an insane amount of HP. But obviously the builds in these two characters are pretty different in terms of their use case, so I really wouldn't hold that against her. Now, when it comes to deciding whether or not Lady of the Scales is worth it, though, there's a lot to consider. Based on her pros currently, she is clearly designed for PvP focused players, and otherwise the investment to build and obtain her can feel a little bit less worth it, especially if you're looking for a PvP and PvE viable character. If your goal is PvP though, especially in RTA drafts and arena control, I'd definitely say that Lady of the Scales is a character you should keep an eye on, especially with the preseason ending. Her flexibility, utility, and control make her a top tier support pick in PvP, but that said, in the current state of RTA and even arena, she's pretty decent, honestly, and honestly I'd even go so far as to call her great, and she provides a lot of options for how to punish the enemy. As always though, this does feel like yet another character who either needs pretty good counter gear or will probably need decent or an okay amount of speed gear depending on what you're looking for. But otherwise, guys, I think I speak for everyone when I say that she honestly just looks really cool conceptually. Thanks again for watching though, everyone. I'll see you on the next one. Stay safe, stay healthy, good luck with your polls.